He had his gun, so he just swung it open.
I start to notice that, the atmosphere feels a little bit weird.
First thing he seen was this 6.5 foot tall, broad shoulder, dark hair. That freaked him out.
We hadn't talked to her about like life and death and what any of that means. She's 3 years old,
So we turned around. Suddenly there's a whole tree falling across the road.
And she was describing to us that, there was a deceased person that she could see visually.
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, where we tackle the ever-expanding history and mystery of monsters and supernatural madness every Monday. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca for more information, or even check out exclusive content and support us at patreon.com/CryptidClues.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and today we are looking at the UFO hotspot in Japan specifically. Before we get into that, however, check out last week's episode on Paranormal Connections with Hell's Gate, located in British Columbia, Canada. And before that, you can find an interview I had conducted where we have a special guest basically detailing the encounter that her parents had in Harrison Hot Springs regarding a possible Sasquatch. Very good stuff. Lots more that you can find on our website, CryptidClues.ca, our social media channels, YouTube, X, Facebook, and Patreon. And if you ever want to reach us directly, you can do so via CryptidClues@gmail.com. So, without further ado, let's get into this. Now, we've briefly covered in the past UFOs in other countries, and Japan, of course, is no exception here, but just like all countries, governments, what appears to be a lack thereof concern or interest to push further into these unidentified flying objects remains prevalent amongst the majority of these countries' political parties. But oddly enough, a couple years ago, the Japanese Defense Ministry strongly presumed that these flying objects sighted within the country were actually surveillance balloons dispatched by China. This has me wondering, just how many of these so-called weather balloons does China have out and about in the world? Or, are the weather balloons really just the ultimate government go-to cover-up for UFO, UAP sightings? Something just to ponder. Now, if you've tuned in before, you'll be familiar with this next part, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. This was created in 2022 by the U.S. Defense Department to investigate UFO UAP sightings. This organization put out a report last year that designated the region of Western Japan all the way to China as a prime hotspot for UAP UFO sightings. This information has been collected based on events and experiences between 1996 to 2023. So this is a couple decades worth of information here that was basically used to formulate this area and this region as being a hotspot for this type of stuff. Now, it's important to remember that UAP, UFO doesn't mean alien or extraterrestrial. It has that affiliation, of course, and we look at it as such, but it's the terminology that I suspect the powers to be are a little more forthcoming with that information, if that makes sense. Now, it's a biased point of view, of course, and not based on really factual evidence whatsoever, but I reckon it's a way to semi-satisfy the curious minds out there that investigate these things. Like, hey, we have this group here that looks into UFOs, UAPs, but doesn't really mean aliens. It could be weather balloons, it could be technology from other countries. We don't know. They're unidentified. Wow. On the flip side, governments can keep focusing and shift their sights elsewhere, not towards the technologies or species that may or may not exist. That's me being very, very biased. If they present something out in the open for people to look at and engage with, they can focus their attention on something else that's much more prevalent, much more serious, and, well, worth their time and attention. I digress, though. It's a specific scenario not backed by anything factual, but it's something that lingers on my mind nonetheless. So, what I was trying to allude to, however, is the greater appearance of UAPs and UFOs, whilst we have to deal with more unmanned aerial craft like drones and such that are, for example, dominating battlefields in recent conflicts, but are also expanding our areas of surveillance. These advanced technologies developed by rival countries, that can be misinterpreted for UFOs and UAPs. Stuff that is being developed in secret. We're seeing technology at an all-time it's accelerating, and never before seen in our history has technology been amplifying and just getting more stronger and stronger, and it's breaking boundaries for what we can do now. And so some countries are absolutely more ahead, and this is a conversation I've had with many people where in Western society, we think we're the bee's knees. We think we're at the top of the, I'm not going to say food chain, but we think we're doing pretty okay and pretty good. And you know what? It's not terrible. We're doing pretty okay. But if you look over onto some of these Eastern countries like China, like Japan, like the technology that they have and the minds behind some of their creations is flabbergasting. The things that you will encounter there is exceptionally decades beyond what we have here. It's amazing. It's incredible. They're living in the future. They really, really are. So that's what I'm trying to explain here, is that there are some countries that have things that we are still very, very far away from acquiring or developing on our own. So that's something just to take into account, because the reports of how some of these objects maneuver, it's what scientists and experts do stress out about needing more data to properly understand. Now, many UFO investigators in Japan, they'll state that summertime is the season when sightings prominently take place. Now, I'd say probably the mid-June area, but now I mentioned Japanese hotspots, but in general, the entire country connecting towards China, like I said, is what the hotspot is. While there are a few districts located in Japan that are more prominent than others, one such place is Lino, which has since been merged into this expanded city of Fukushima. Lino is notoriously famous for UFOs. Japan's first UFO lab actually opened up here, which was formed to study and observe sightings. There's also a UFO museum nearby as well, but if you happen to be visiting Japan in mid-June, like I said, you may be fortunate enough to actually spot something in the skies on your own. One such sighting was spotted northeast of Fukushima when an unknown object appeared at 7 a.m. in the morning. Witnesses claim it resembled a hot air balloon. However, Japan's meteorological agency denied having any observational equipment dispatched in that area at the time. Police went as far as sending helicopters out to investigate the object, but were forced to turn around due to accelerating, dangerous weather concerns and conditions. So ultimately, police stated the aerial object disappeared. It had caused no damage or danger to commercial flight paths, but again, just don't know what it was. In December of 2019, it was reported that an illuminating object traveled through the sky at incredible speeds in Iwaki City, also located in Fukushima. That April, that followed next year, started to gain attention from the government. Now, the defense minister announced plans to address a course of action in the event that Japan's self-defense force encounters a UFO. It was stated that while the self-defense force has not witnessed a UFO, now that classic footage in black and white released by the United States Defense Department sparked large concern regarding Japan's national security. I'm going to play a quick snippet here so you can see for yourself if you are unfamiliar with that footage. Reuben and I have explored it in previous episodes, so here we go.
Dude, there's a on, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing. It's rotating.
So with this footage, it caused a stir amongst the Japanese government. Now, I'm just saying, like, it became really, really prevalent, and it made them realize, okay, we need to do something to create our own equivalent to the All-Domain Anomaly Research Office. And so new procedures began to be set in place to ensure that Japanese self-defense force members had the resources to not only confirm they are seeing unidentified aerial objects, but could take these written photographic records to be further analyzed, in addition to the collection of information that has been provided by the public from public experiences. So this is great and powerful. And then again, it's still new and it's still being worked on, just like it's still being worked on in North America. For example, airline pilots who see things and have no proper way to report these things. Going back a few months, we had the pilots over central Canada who all joined in on calls together while they were flying to report seeing unidentified lights moving at exceptional speeds only to have limited reporting responses. I personally don't doubt a more private-based system that catalogs things and is aware of certain, albeit otherworldly or other country-related aerial incursions into their airspace, but on a public basis, it's still a very new and ongoing thing that is developing. And things are progressing for commercial pilots, though. Pilots who witness crafts flying inexplainably would be able to submit sighting reports to the FAA. And this would be from a bipartisan legislation that was introduced back in January during the congressional hearing regarding UAPs and extraterrestrials. We did a two-parter series that is available on our podcast feeds on this congressional hearing. It highlighted the important parts, so you don't have to go through the entire thing. You can tune into the important components that we highlight and thought were, the most important things that needed to be discussed. So, side note, if you aren't sure what the FAA is, this is basically the agency that carries the responsibility of directing air traffic control around the country, ensuring public protection during spaceship launches, airport inspections, construction, and operations of airports. They even have advanced satellite navigation. They are the be-all, end-all of anything above our heads, you could say. So to have them in your back pocket as a UAP UFO reporting agency is a huge game changer. I think that would be a lot less stressful for pilots too, because they need to know what's going on. If they're flying these routes 35,000 feet above our heads, they need to know that things are in the clear and things are safe. And that's one of the biggest concerns, is that when these things are spotted, you're hoping that it's not posing a threat to air traffic. That's the biggest thing. So jumping ahead here, as we near 2025, there's a city of Kofu, and individuals that are residing in this city located in Japan, they're actually looking to commemorate the 50th anniversary of a prominent UFO experience. It took place on February 23rd, 1975. Two young kids in Kofu reported seeing two orange flashing saucer-shaped UFOs at around 6:30 p.m. local time. As per their report, an actual 4-foot-tall alien with a large head, elongated ears, and 3 fangs appeared from one of the objects. While it had a brown face, it was actually devoid of its eyes and nose. There was nothing. It's definitely a peculiar detail. Of course, this is from two children that could be, I dare I say, imagining things. I'm not trying to be a super devil's advocate here, but just putting it out there. Now, going back almost 50 years, I do want to highlight that Japanese children had very different upbringings compared to North American children. And I'm not saying they were devoid of being silly, but there was a different degree of discipline involved in raising children in Japan compared to North America at this time in history. You also have two of them which both corroborated the same details of this encounter. One who is grown up now still stands by his experience, and he's actually looking to be celebrating the 50th anniversary event in Kofu. So if we jump back a year from this experience these kids had to 1974, we have another UFO encounter, considered one of Japan's most famous, along with the Kofu sighting. Now this took place on the 19th of September in Hokkaido, Japan. At around 8 p.m. local time, several nearby residents and airport workers noticed these sudden bright lights flashing in the sky overhead. And they were moving erratically, even changing colors, which of course prompted the personnel at the airport to report this to local authorities. Reasonably, the big fear here, like I said, was just concerns regarding air traffic safety, as these lights were moving at lower and lower altitudes by the second. Witnesses described the lights as being part of a larger disc-shaped object. It had some reports basically stating that this object was metallic and had a structured form to it, very much unlike your conventional aircraft. Now, we mentioned low altitude. Some believe that whatever this was, it had possibly landed on the ground due to how low the lights were. And it wasn't long before Japanese defenses were alerted. Fighter jets were even scrambled to investigate this further, but there's no such documentation or details from the Japanese military that was ever released regarding this event. Now, air traffic control did detect the object on radar, and this corroborates with the visual sightings. But the specifics regarding the radar data and the object's movements have also never been publicly disclosed. So there's something shady going on here, and there's definitely information that is being withheld from the public. An event like this also receives significant media attention. Makes sense. I mean, people were it's at an airport, which again, this has helped hail it as one of, if not Japan's most famous historical UFO encounter. But even with all this publicity and excitement, no conclusive explanation was provided by the authorities, which at this point starts to prompt conspiracies and other results that people deduce as they apply logic to a seemingly illogical experience. Now, while these and other sightings are occurring in more recent Japan years, now UFO lore in Japanese culture has been prevalent since the 19th century. And this really blew my mind, and it got me pretty excited here. For example, 1803, a round vessel appeared on the Japanese coast where reportedly a woman emerged in strange clothes, carrying a box, and was unable to communicate with the locals. The object she emerged from had mysterious markings on it as well that has been recorded and noted. Now, this story is very well known in Japanese lore and has sketchworks done from 1815 to 1825 depicting what the object and woman looked like. Of course, it varies depending on the drawings, but what was first deduced as an embellished account of a Russian whaling ship that ran aground was dismissed because no mention of such a disaster was found in any known records. But then you have these 11 documents relating to the Hitachi Utsurubun legend, which is the title given to this account. Now, the unique details about this is that Japan in 1803 was exceptionally closed off. They were not friendly to newcomers. It was, it was us on our island. So if there were any large shipwrecks by foreign countries, it would have been a huge impact that the local political powers would have documented such an event, and it would have been further investigated. If there were survivors, they would have probably been executed. It would not have been a friendly situation for anyone that was landing on Japan's soil, but that's not the case here. Regarding this object, you have specific pictures showing the craft resembling a flying saucer. I'm going to put those photos in here, and I'm also going to put them on the Patreon. Now, the woman's clothing varies in these different depictions, as do the shape and size of the vessel, but they all share strikingly similar features. Now, the features of a flying saucer. Maybe I'm being biased when I say that, but I'll let you decide when you look at these photos. So it's similar to how in religious depictions too, you have old paintings of mysterious flying objects, not to mention phrasings like chariots of fire and such, which can really leave you wondering what exactly they were seeing back then and what were they trying to memorialize in our history for future generations. In closing, I'm going to cap off here with something a little bit more modern. Taking place on October 4th, 2023 over Azumayama Park. A group of mountain climbers caught sight of a large cigar-shaped object with an orange glow hovering in the sky at night. It was reported to be 80 meters in length, which is about 262 feet, and remained stationary for a prolonged period of time before it just vanished. Following this event, nearby residents began seeing strange things near the forest. Well, of course, eyewitness testimonies aren't conclusive due to influence by suggestion, media, and personal beliefs. They're always the first step when encountering the unknown. And so when I say they start seeing strange things, it popped up. People were seeing bipedal things. They were seeing strange lights and every manner of affiliation that would follow after seeing a UFO, I guess you could say. People were starting to see these things. So this turned into quite the prevalent hotspot in itself in Japan. So it's quite something. There's a lot going on this part of the world, and yeah, it's baffling. It really, really is, and it's so cool to see how other countries are handling this development as we are becoming much more engaging and forthcoming and being open to, in a public setting, discussing UFOs, UAPs, and extraterrestrials, especially in congressional hearings too. So thank you for tuning into this episode of Cryptid Clues. Being designated as a hotspot in Japan, I think I might explore what China has regarding UFO encounters. While I imagine it is absolutely, most definitely under lock and key, maybe other than that, their sky is just filled with weather balloons everywhere. Just you can't even see the blue sky. It's just weather balloon. I don't know. But what I do know is that we'll be back next week with more content to explore. Until then, you can find us on our website, CryptidClues.ca, our social media channels, X, YouTube, Facebook, and Patreon. Additionally, you can reach us directly via CryptidClues@gmail.com. Until next time, everyone, take care and stay safe.